Hi, I'm Heidi Rader with the University of Alaska Fairbanks Extension. I'm here in Petersburg, Alaska at the 2023 Southeast Alaska Farmers Summit. I'm with Rob Bishop of Hoonah and the Alaska Apple Farms, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his apple farm and what he sells and grows, and a little bit of advice for new farmers starting out. So Rob, tell us a little bit about your farm and what you sell and what you grow and when you got into it.
Well, we have approximately 5.5 acres of land that we are developing, and had the privilege to go through Spruce Root and go through a business plan and put together a bunch of numbers to actually see how these things actually would work. And initially we had spent a lot of time and energy investing and experimenting, localizing, figure out exactly what trees work for our area, with lots of observation with other trees in our area that we noted that produce high amounts of fruit. It got us excited. We were able to apply and research what others are doing down south and apply those ideas to our area, and localize the certain varieties that actually work through about 10 to 12 years of trials, and in the meantime having to master grafting and how to keep trees alive and what would work for Southeast Alaska. And so we've been doing it since, I believe, 2008, and we're kind of going to the next level with this acreage. We've been experimenting well, since 2008, and our trees are now, the larger trees from the beginning are now either well producing, the ones that were the good varieties, and then of course we've got a lot of trees, hundreds of trees that we've tried over the years that we've just kind of X'd out that are there still or not. And so now we're kind of localizing and really targeting on like 3 varieties that we really want to utilize for commercial aspects for our area. And so Alaska Apple Farms, going through the program, we've been given an opportunity to really put a plan together that we believe is going to work for our area. And in the meantime, we have other products available. We sell trees locally, and we work with people on pruning aspects and really just counseling each other and trying new things. And so really we're kind of in the beginning stages, even after 10 years of experimentation, not really having a source that's local to tell you how to do it. So we've had the privilege to kill a lot of trees and to learn from what others are doing. Just in our area right here, the pioneers that had trees like Yellow Transparent, Williams Pride. There's a few local varieties that we discovered that we were able to take and graft. There's one variety specifically that we discovered in somebody's backyard that appears to be unique, that actually looks promising. And so we're trying to put all this stuff together and attend forums such as the Farmers Summit here, and try to get the education out there, because it helps us to combine efforts with other people and see what others are doing. Often this generates new ideas. People bring other varieties that they're wanting to try. We're able to teach people how to graft. And awesome. So yes, it's there's a lot of avenues that we're kind of going to, and ultimately hoping to get into agritourism.
What type of rootstock are you grafting your varieties onto?
So Southeast Alaska, there's hundreds of rootstocks out there, and we're kind of honing in on Buttigovsky 118 has worked well for us. There are some varieties of apple, and we're talking mostly apple here. We do cherries and plums, but apple is really what Alaska Apple Farms is targeting. It's worked the best for us. Buttigovsky 118.
Is that a crabapple rootstock? Or?
Most of them are a variation of a crabapple, but it's actually it has Russian roots in it. And I know that up north, there's a couple other variations that are more cold hardy, but we're more concerned about the wetness. And a rootstock, if people aren't familiar, determines the size of the tree, the hardiness of the tree. We're also utilizing what we call interstem trees. This new site we just planted utilizes Budagovsky 118 with a dwarfing rootstock, so a semi-dwarf base, which gives us the benefit of a stable tree base. Anything that's a dwarf tree has to get staked or actually get put on a trellis system. And so by utilizing Budagovsky 118 and then putting B9, Budagovsky 9, which is a common commercial rootstock, we're getting the added benefits of dwarfing and condensing our trees a little further and being able to plant more condensed inside our site. And so it's something that we've seen maybe one or two people try over the years, but we decided to try it on this site. And so far it seems to be working. So that's our
great.
decision on that one. But there are a few other ones available.
And in your presentation, you talked about a trellis system. What type of trellising are you using?
So tall spindle system is one that I'm more looking at. V-trellis is one that it's just, there's too much work. I don't think I'm interested in that, but it's good to see what others are doing down south. And so for us, we're experimenting with more the tall spindle system with this more condensed version of a semi-dwarf with these B9 interstem trees. And so for us, I see the benefits of it. Just the 3-foot spacing is what we have on there, but we may add in between over time as we kind of spread out on our lot. So.
And what percentage of your sales at this point come from the trees versus selling the apples versus value-added products? And what are you hoping to have in the future with agritourism?
So for us, everything's coming out of the trees, and so we've been giving away most of the fruit to get it. You know, with the idea in Southeast to have fruit and apples, it's not in the minds of people. Everybody just doesn't think of apples within Alaska, and so this concept is new. And to target an apple that people actually want to just pick up and eat is, you know, we're having to educate the public, because you can get any apple to grow around here, but it may not be an apple that you can really sell or market, because people see the commercial industry, they target the red apples, they target longevity, they target size, and so you know, we're just a different market. And so what we're trying to educate people to say is, look, our apples are different than what they have down south, and in some ways they're a lot better. And so to have that opportunity, right now we've been taking everything we have and we've been giving it to the community, and we're just trying to generate support in the background here while we're selling trees in the background to help support get the orchard going.
Are those apples tend to be more sour than what you would buy at the store?
So two varieties that we're really interested in for commercial aspects in Southeast, Williams Pride and Pristine. There are a few other varieties. Discovery is one that we have potential for here. These are all early season varieties, but they're also disease resistant varieties, meaning apple scab is like number one on the list in our area as far as not having to spray a bunch of chemicals. So our hope is to not have to be a commercial orchard that has to put chemicals in everything. We want to be as organic as possible. By doing that, there are varieties available that have the tolerance to actually have wet feet and to overcome a lot of the diseases that most people would be deterred by. So those two varieties right there can give you an apple that actually looks like an apple and not be so scabby and having to maintain a bunch of extra maintenance on it. But for the flavor, I'll tell you now that the site we're on right now, you know, every site's different, and we're discovering that Williams Pride has the ability to have red flesh inside of it. And there's something about the soils here, everything I've seen on YouTube regarding the varieties here, people describe them as something a different flavor down south. And so I see that maybe there's something here that we have that's special, that when you take an apple that's in a greenhouse and you put it outside, they look like an apple, they're edible. One will look like a Granny Smith and maybe get lots of size, and one still looks maybe a little pinky and it sweetens up. Some people are okay with a tart apple and some aren't. And so Williams is what I would describe as more flowery, tastes sweeter. It can be very cidery sometimes.
Yum.
And then the Pristine that we have is more tart. Some people enjoy that a lot more. Those are just two varieties out of many we've tried, but those two are high on the list.
And there might be some nutritional benefits to a little more tart of an apple too. So what got you into this endeavor, and what keeps you going?
Well, it started with noting that there are plenty of homes around us that have tried apples, and to see trees that actually had apples just laden trees. And this description from, we've had discussions about fruit here. Apples can't grow in Alaska. Well, UAF put out, there was an extension, I believe it was 100 years ago almost, when they were doing a Sitka extension agency. At one time, they put out hundreds of trials, and they pretty much deemed it as, no, this isn't going to work here. But the climate has changed. Things have changed, and it hasn't really been discussed, because when you get something in your head, for many years people say, well, garlic doesn't grow here. Well, somebody did it, and all of a sudden they wrote, no, it actually thrives here. You just got to think differently.
Right.
You got to know how to farm it, and so we don't have a manual here to do it. So we're kind of constructing that over the last 10 years and trying to educate people and get ideas together.
And have you experimented with growing them in high tunnels or undercover?
So high tunnels is a big one. We put a presentation out, Chilkat Valley Orchards. We're very fortunate to work with them. They had a grant through the Bald Eagle Foundation and requested to put a number of videos on how-tos. And honestly, it's probably the most up-to-date version for our area as far as the potential for greenhouse apples, orchards, which we pretty much limited. We call them micro orchards, because down south, if you ever hear the term, hundreds of acres of easy flat land. So we're challenged, so we're trying to figure out how to condense it. Greenhouses have great potential. And you're not limited to, again, these early season varieties that we have outside. All of a sudden, Honeycrisp, everything ripens out, but we have condensed versions where we're getting like 60 pounds on a little tiny tree that may be a 4x4 area, and they just load up. And so we have a few methods on there. I would really look at the website, Chilkat Valley Orchards. They're actually on YouTube, and there's a whole series on there.
Okay, great. So what would you recommend to someone who would like to start their own orchard in Southeast?
First of all, pick your site wisely. It's good to do research. You don't need to trial every little thing we have. We've tried to give information to people, so you don't have to go through all the woes. Realistically, your soils are number one. Your drainage needs to happen. You have a good place with drainage. Those are common things. What we try to encourage people to do is, if you have the soil, always try to plant on a mound. That's something that's kind of a new idea, because everybody wants to plant on a flat hillside. But realistically, in our area, there's so much snow. There's a lot of added benefits. Planting on mounds gives you the benefit of mulching the hill continuously and getting it out of the snow. And then the early season, it tends to melt out a little faster. So all that stuff we have in other presentations.
And what's your primary fertilizer for the apples?
So we use, there's a book called The Holistic Orchard from Michael Phillips, and that's where I started out at. And he's an East Coast farmer. We were fortunate enough to have a presentation with him again in this last episode with YouTube, Chilkat Valley Orchards. What I'm trying to say with him is, with Michael Phillips' Holistic Orchard, he goes through a holistic way of doing things. So we're not just amending everything with store-bought fertilizers of any sort. So for us personally, we encourage utilizing the beach kelps that are easily available to most people in Southeast. In fact, on the East Coast now, they're rendering kelp into powder that they could put through their their tubes and feed all their big orchard systems like that. So to them, it's kind of a new thing. But for us here, it's been used for many, many ages, and with this thought of concern with the salts and how that may create issues. And I can tell you now, we have not had issues with salt.
Great.
So beach kelp, fish, we often utilize just whatever's available, just mulching highly around the tree line.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about growing apples in Southeast Alaska or about Alaska apple farms?
I will say that I do see a huge value in having orchards in our small communities especially, and to really get in the minds of people that there are options available. There needs to be more study. There needs to be more support for orchards. It's not just the financial aspects that come with having an orchard, but there's a lot to be learned in schools and grafting, how to graft trees. You can learn a lot about just life in general, walking through an orchard. And so that's one of the reasons why we established Alaska Apple Farms. It's not just the value of having an orchard, but the value of bringing people together. I'd really see a huge value at this time that we, especially after COVID, there needs to be more of. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your farm with us and the information, and good luck.
Thank you.